Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Carry On Friends, the Caribbean American podcast. I am excited for my guest today to be on the podcast. Caleb, welcome to Carry On Friends. How are you?
I am doing quite well. Thank you, Carrie Ann. It is an absolute pleasure to be on with you today.
All right. I'm excited to have you for folks to hear your story and to get into it. So, why don't you tell the community of friends a little bit about who you are, Caribbean country you represent, and the work you do?
I appreciate that. I'm Trinidadian, firstly. A little bit about my background. I spent 15 years at Citibank as a global financial services director. Um, Last 3 years, I was based in Europe, actually in Budapest, where I had responsibility for managing a set of operations across Europe, Middle East, Asia, and Africa. That was 2010 to about 2013. So I've been back in the States since I think returned about 2014. And shortly after my return, had a set of circumstances that really kind of changed the trajectory of my life. And so I'm excited to share with you and your audience about that change.
I mean, so let's tell the audience how we know each other. We've been semi-finalists in Pharrell Williams' Black Ambition program, and that's
Yes.
how we've met. And everywhere you go, when Caribbean people find each other like glue, we just kind of, say, "Ooh, who are you? What's going on?" So I'm really excited for the audience to hear about what you're working on. But before we get there, why don't you just tell the story? Because I was pulled in when I heard the story
Yeah.
of how you got to what you're working on right now. So tell the audience a little bit about that.
All right. Came back from Europe, and while we were in Europe, my son was in a football academy, and so we got back, and the professional club in Orlando invited him to a weekend trial. He gets there, and he sprains his ankle on the first day. And if you've ever sprained an ankle, Carrie Ann, you know you're done for a week, right? And sometimes a couple. So one of my big brothers happened to be in attendance at the trial, and he turns to me and he says, "Well, why don't we apply the family remedy?" I said, "What family remedy?" Well, as it turned out, my grandmother, Mother Skinner, back in the late 1800s in Trinidad, um, discovered a plant that had extraordinary restorative properties. Okay. And so, as you know, during that time, only aristocrats on the island would have access to modern medicine. So, she was the, community village doctor for her village. So she would, take, this plant and mix it with herbs and other plants with known medicinal properties. And that's basically how she would treat, the residents within her community. So my brother mentioned this remedy and he said, "All right, let's put on my son's ankle." So my son goes back to the hotel where the other players are staying, and we go back to my brother's house, get this remedy, mixed it up as best as we could remember because my grandmother passed it on to my mother, and both of them were deceased at this point. We mix up this concoction and we take it back to the hotel. On the way back, we purchase an ace bandage. We paste it onto the bandage, put it on my son's ankle, wrap the ankle. Carrie Ann, he called me 7 o'clock the next morning and said, "Dad, I'm ready to go." I said, wait. What do you mean you're ready to go? Your ankle was swollen and you couldn't walk, 12 hours early. He said, "Yeah, most of the pain and swelling is gone. I'm ready to go." And so, literally, after witnessing what would best be described as a modern day miracle, that changed my life.
So, I mean, how your brother know about this remedy and you didn't know about this remedy?
All right. So we went back to Trinidad. I think it was 2019. We had a family reunion. And so my grandmother had 9 children, right? And so I'm expecting all of her children and their descendants would know about this plant and this remedy. So I'm talking to all the old heads and asking about this, that, and the other. And come to find out, Carrie Ann, my grandmother only shared sources and methods with my mother. My mother only shared sources and methods with my big brother. Had that incident at Orlando City Football Club, if that didn't happen in 2014 or so, my brother would more than likely have taken this remedy to his grave because they kept everything to the vest, close to the vest. Now, I can't tell you why they did that, right? But literally for over 100 years, these two women held on to this remedy. I don't know if you remember when I first came to this country, there was an old comedian, was Flip Wilson. I don't know if you remember Flip Wilson.
I do.
He had a saying, loose lips sink ship. Imagine, Carrie Ann, had my grandmother shared the remedy with all of her children, had my mother shared it, what's the likelihood that I would have an opportunity to develop this ingredient today?
Yeah, yeah, you would have um cut into her revenue, profits, all of that, her demand would have, lowered. So your grandmother from the 1800s had this remedy. And is this plant only native to Trinidad and Tobago, or is it found anywhere in the
So you
world?
can find it across the Caribbean.
Okay. All right. And so tell everyone now. So you come up on this almost miracle medicine,
Yes,
worked on your son,
yes.
and so tell us where continue the story. We love stories here, So continue the story of how this discovery has propelled you on the path that you're on now.
All right. So after what I describe as witnessing a modern day miracle with my son, I called a buddy who is a PhD compound pharmacist, told him the story, and I said, I want you to modernize my grandmother's remedy. And we used a poultice, right? And a poultice is just, you paste on a piece of cloth. That's basically how it was done.
Yeah.
So in my mind, the kind of the evolution was a modern day pain patch, right? And so remember, I said Asia was part of the region that I managed for City, so I had contacts in China. My brother and I flew to China and met with different factories and so forth, and we had the ingredient impregnated into a pain patch, and so we had this company who friend of mine owned this factory in China. They made 200 samples for us, and we came back and we started testing everyone that we could find that had an acute injury because we thought at the time that's what the remedy did. So everyone we tested that had an acute injury had a similar result as my son. So then people started asking, would your grandmother's remedy work on my arthritis, my fibromyalgia, my menstrual, my migraine, my this, that, and the other? Where we said, well, we don't know, but we're willing to test, so willing to try it. So over the course of about the next year and a half, we used Survey Monkey for traceability, right? Where you could put in your before and your after pain level. We tested 200 chronic pain sufferers. Now listen to this. 85% of them reported some level of relief. Carrie Ann, 70% reported relief lasting greater than 24 hours with a single application of the patch. 35% said relief lasted more than 2 days. After we collected this data, I reached out to a buddy who is an MD, pain management. He said to me, he said, Caleb, there is no product on this planet, drug, natural or otherwise, that could match. And he said, people don't lie. People lie about a whole lot of things. They don't lie about pain. Okay?
You got that right. When it hurt, it hurt.
So he said, what your grandmother discovered is unbelievable. I went back to City and I wrote my resignation. And I said, guys, it's been great. We've done some amazing things at City, but we're not doing anything here that's going to change lives, have the kind of impact that this remedy could potentially have, right? And so 100 years of anecdotal evidence is amazing, but you got all kinds of products making claims. So I knew that we had to back what I just described with science. So I approached University of South Florida here in Tampa, and my company was accepted into what they call the technology incubator. And in 2018, two of the scientists that we were working on, they started a study to identify the active component in this plant that was actually doing all of this incredible work. 1.5 years later, by I think it was summer of 2019, USF, University of South Florida, here in Tampa, confirmed the active ingredient in the plant as a new botanical drug discovery. And get this, the first ever such discovery credited to a Black owned company in US history.
Let's hear it for you. Oh my goodness. This is amazing because as you were talking, I'm like fervently scribbling things because I'm like, I hope this is patented. I hope he's done all of these things to protect his findings. Yes, it's just wherever, but I know you've said, you have connections. I'm sure you've done it, but I'm like, I hope they don't take this, invention from him. You know,
This what you're saying keeps me up at nights to make sure that we've got this thing protected.
listen, we got to do what we got to do because big pharma could be coming for you.
No doubt about it. No doubt.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Awesome. So continue to tell us about this incredible remedy
Yeah.
passed from your grandmother to your mother to your big brother.
Yeah.
And, you know, as it would happen, your brother said, let's fix up my nephew so he could do
Yep.
his football trials. And here we are finding this like, wow. And you're like, you know what, City? It's been good, but you see this thing,
Yeah.
it's better. So so
We out.
peace out. Peace out. On to the next. I mean, we're laughing about it, but we have to, do it in our little Caribbean flair.
Yes.
And so, where are you now with the product? What are the findings? Because I know there's another part to it
Yeah.
that I want you to tell the audience the whole story because I know, we tell stories so great and you do that well, Caleb. So I want you to tell the audience what came next.
All right. So once USF confirmed that we had a new plant derived drug discovery, it became clear for me at this point that we potentially had the next aspirin. So some of the audience may know that aspirin came from the bark of the willow tree back in the early 1800s, right? And the company Bear Aspirin literally was founded on that discovery. And so the next kind of step for me was to, my son had the experience. We did the study with the 200. Now we need to make some products to get it out on the market. But we can't disclose the ingredient. So how are we going to sell the products, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we created a brand and we called the brand Relieve It. And what we did, Carrie Ann, because the FDA requires that you must disclose all of the ingredients in a product, and rightfully so. So we use arnica as what I call the purported active, meaning that that's the active that we disclose. And in the inactive, we show the resin, right? And so we still disclosed it. It was just fully disclosed. So this way we could get the product on the market, actually have people using the product. And because, sometimes you have something um, and it's not really real until you've created a product, right? And so we actually started with um, a sprain product called Sprain Go, and then we created another product called the Relieve It Gel for chronic pain sufferers. And then in 2021, we connected with the Home Shopping Network, and we launched a foot spray for women. And I got to tell you the story about this foot spray, right?
Yes.
So I'll come back in a minute
To
and
the products, but
yeah,
tell
yeah,
us about the foot spray.
yeah, yeah. But I got to tell you about this foot spray. So I'm sitting on the tarmac. Well, I was in the UK, and I read this article where they surveyed 1,000 women, and 80% of them said, "We gonna wear our high heels no matter what." In other words, we're gonna suffer for pain. And I said, you know what? Nobody has ever solved foot pain or that discomfort for women. So I got back to Tampa, assembled my team, and I said, shared what I read. I said, we have this anti inflammatory, right? Women all over the world love shoes. They're not going to stop wearing the beautiful shoes. What if we create a product for them that could help to minimize the discomfort by them applying it before they wear their high heels? And so we created this product and we said, okay, we got to do something really pretty. And so we put it in a Chanel like twist up canister, right? And then we took it to Home Shopping Network. In fact, we were selected as what you call a big find. So Home Shopping Network went to I think five or six different cities across the country, and they had thousands of companies coming in and pitching products, and we were one of 70 that was selected. So now we've got products on Amazon, we've got products on Home Shopping Network, and so this is going fantastic. So it allows us now, to get what I call some real world evidence, right? While we're continuing to develop the science. And so let's talk about the advancement of the science now. So after we discovered the university confirmed the drug discovery, CBD has been, as getting a whole lot of love, right? And so asked the scientists, I said, I want to know, how does my grandmother's ingredient compare to CBD? And so we did a study, and there was no comparison.
Mm-mm.
Completely outperformed CBD.
Wow.
So then I said, okay, I want to know how our ingredient compares to the big boys in the pharmaceutical space: ibuprofen, naproxen, and diclofenac. And so I said, I want this study to be outsourced to a third party. So no one could come back once we have the results and say, well,
And
no, it was
say
done
you
by
are
the
doctoring it.
university. It's,
Yeah.
your company's part of the university. No, 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 no. We're not going to do that. We're going to outsource it. We outsourced the study, and here was the results. Our ingredient outperformed naproxen and ibuprofen at one half the concentration. Let that sink in for a minute. And so, just to kind of frame this up for you, the World Health.
And wait,
Mhm.
and before we do that, because your product is still more like a topical versus those are ones that most likely you're ingesting,
Yes,
right? And
yes,
so even for somebody like me who always like I don't want to take too much pills, I mean, yes, there's absorption in the body, but that's still at a lesser dosage than what the other bigger brands are doing. So that is huge.
it is. But we plan to get to an ingestion in the next year as well.
Interesting. Tell me more. Well, let's continue with the other story.
So, all right. So we conduct this study, and we get the results, and so now we're thinking, okay, this is just incredible. Every time I think we figure out what this thing can do, there's more. All right, so I'm going to get to the ingestible in a minute, but let me share some other things with you. We did another study. So these are called bioavailability studies. In other words, we were looking to discover what all does the ingredient do. So we did an antibacterial study, and come to find out, the ingredient has antibacterial activity against two of the most common bacteria that affects the gut and the skin. Most people have heard of like a staph infection, right? Somebody has surgery, they have a staph
Yeah.
infection. And so staph is a shortened version of a long scientific word. And but we had strong activity in terms of antibacterial. We also learned that it's an antihistamine. So if you were to get a mosquito bite, you know, poison ivy or anything such as that, you could apply our product. And literally, matter of fact, I'll give you an example. I was on the phone in my driveway about a year ago, and I have a pond in my backyard, and I live in Florida, so it's 7 o'clock, and mosquitoes like
Boy,
everywhere.
they come out like they just terrible. They are just
They don't play, right? And so I'm on the phone and not realizing that I'm literally being eaten alive. So I go back in the house and I have like 20 whelps on my arms, on my legs, everywhere. And my daughter said, "Well, Dad, it's just inflammation. So why don't we apply Relieve It?" Carrie Ann, she applied the Relieve It everywhere I had whelps. Within about a minute, the itching was gone. An hour and a half later, you couldn't tell I had been bitten by mosquitoes. So I go to the Mayo Clinic, I do a Google to see how long on average does it take for itching to go away using the leading brands and for the whelps. They said days. Within a minute, the itching was gone.
Mhm.
And so I remember one of my sisters saying that she heard my mother say, "This thing just works on everything." Now, of course, my mother and my grandmother wouldn't have known that most pain, most ailments have to do with inflammation, right? They just knew that it worked. So the World Health Organization describes chronic inflammation, Karen, as the greatest threat to human health. We have a solution that could help. In fact, 1 in 3 adults worldwide suffer from some form of chronic inflammation. In the United States alone, you have over 200 million people, nearly two-thirds of the population, suffering from chronic inflammation. This thing is serious.
Yeah.
And so, we were talking about NSAIDs earlier, the ibuprofen and naproxen and so forth. There's over 10 billion NSAIDs that are consumed globally every year. Think about it, 10 billion, because people are in pain,
In pain. Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so this is really why I walked away from City, on a mission to help people live their lives happier, healthier, pain free,
Free. I was just about to say pain free
right?
because we talked about it. My mom, her knees, so she wanted to do, she visited us last summer and she wants to spend time with the grandkids and she's walking slower because she can't walk as fast because she's in pain. Her knees bother her, so what you're doing is extending the legacy of your grandmother and your mother, one,
Yeah.
right? And you are doing what a lot of people in our community already know. Like in the Caribbean, we have what we need. It's just that it's time for us to monetize
Yes.
our own resources
Yes.
and leverage that for a wider, for the greater good and for commerce. Bottom line, if it don't make money, we can't have the impact we need it to have.
That's right.
And you're able to do that.
Yes.
Um, I had a question for you because you have to talk about the entrepreneurship bit. I
Mm.
mean, you've worked at Citi, you've worked in finance, you've worked in banking. Did that make it easier for you to find funding? Because what people don't know in this entrepreneurship journey,
Mm.
no matter how much money you have in it, you're gonna need money
You're
to to
gonna need money
to
for sure.
to develop, run the business, to grow the business. So was it Was it easier for you to get funding to get this work done, or did you also find that you had to learn things, cuz I guess just dispel some of the things that people might assume about raising money for your business?
So the answer is no, it was not easy, hasn't been easy. I actually thought that with my background, with the team that I have assembled, we would be able to raise funds no problem at all. But what I discovered is that along this entrepreneurial journey, there have been many learnings for me, right? I've had to become almost a quasi scientist. I had to learn that space. I'm a banker, I knew nothing about science. And then once we developed the ingredient and we worked that piece, then I had to become an expert in patent law, excuse me, and so forth, because you talked about, well, I hope he's taking steps to control the IP. Well, guess what? I wasn't an expert in IP. And so I've had to become extremely knowledgeable in that space, right? And then you have the funding piece of it. Well, you don't just show up and say, "Hey, I'm Caleb Williams. I've got this discovery. I want you." It doesn't work,
Don't work that way.
right?
It doesn't. It doesn't matter how phenomenal it is. It just
No.
doesn't.
And so I've looked back and I've watched some things that got funded, and I'm like, well, God bless them, but we're trying to
We've
change
all been s we've all sat and watched, like, that gets funded, and
life.
it failed terribly, and you couldn't give me a fraction of that for
Yes.
this? So
So let
I
me
I wanted you to talk about your experience in financing, to think that finance so, we don't assume that it's easier for you. Go ahead, sorry, I cut you
so
off.
let me tell you what I've learned, that most money, from whether it's from VCs or from angels, it comes down to relationships. So one of my investors, he put some money in early. I want to say maybe around 2016. He said, "I have no idea whether this is going to work or not, but I believe in you."
That's the number one lesson I've learned through this whole process. It's about people.
Right. And so where we struggle as a people, we don't have enough people in our network or in our sphere that can write a check for 100,000, a half a million, a million, just because I believe in you.
I gotta put another applause effect right there because you preaching a word. Take us to sermon. You preaching a word. So I tried a crowd fund. It didn't do as well. I was disappointed, but as my mentor in the Black Ambition program told me, he's like, Carrie Ann, this is just new data. And what has this data told you? That I don't have the network that you said that's able to pull out the money and write a check or support you. And it's nothing to say that your current network or group of people aren't valuable. They are. They listen. They might know other people, but it just means that we have to do much more work to
We
go
do.
and build
We do.
a network that believes in us, number
Correct.
one,
Correct.
because they they could care less about the product. They do, but they invest. So I got some feedback on another thing that I applied for, and they said, "We invest in you first,
Yes.
then the venture."
Yes.
And they're like, "We like you, Carrie Ann. We need you to firm up this."
Yes.
And so I really wanted you to share that because the audience heard how incredible this is.
Yes.
And they may not experience it yet, but everyone listening has some family remedy that they've experienced and is like, yo, this worked. This should be a product.
Yes.
But we want the audience to know that, yes, while we know there is concrete evidence that this works, it doesn't make it easier
That's
for
right.
you to set up a business and run it.
Mm.
And so I just wanted to pause in that storytelling to let's ground people and not think that you're a millionaire yet,
That's right.
you know, just
So,
to tell
so
them that there's still work to do.
that is absolutely right. So we're going to have a showcase at the university for a new product which we call pre-covery, that I'll tell you about shortly. But the purpose of the showcase is to bring in media, investors, folks from the university, just bring the community in. And by community, I mean folks who have the ability to write large checks. And so that I will present to them because, Carrie Ann, as you said, I have to connect with them on a personal level. I am
Yeah.
bringing my team in. I've got folks flying in from Europe. My business advisor was the former head of Sanofi Healthcare North America, and Sanofi is the company that makes all the products that you see Shack advertising, Icy Hot, and Gold Bond, and so forth. And so we're going to bring about 150, 200 people into this room, and I'm going to tell the story because what I've learned, it's not simply about having an amazing innovation or amazing idea. It's people saying, you know what? I'm going to take a chance on you that your team can get this done. And that's what I have. Listen, I came in, as I said, to this thing thinking, I've got a great product. I got da 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 da. It's going to be easy. Now I'm understanding that it truly is about people who have money saying, I'm willing to take a chance on you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want everyone to let that sink in. The past 3 months of me being in this accelerator, which is what Black Ambition kind of was, really drove that home for me completely. I've gotten as far as I've gotten with Carry On Friends, Breadfruit Media, because people believed in me. I didn't come from a radio background. So, I didn't have, but they believed that I could do this. And so, for our audience and everyone's talking about entrepreneurship, understand that a great service, a great product, it's wonderful, but that is a fraction of what you're going to need to get to that next level. So, all right, with that, tell us about pre-covery because that was the baby that we knew about through this program. So tell people about it.
All right. So Precovery was another fascinating discovery. Now, your boy was part of this discovery. All right. So a couple of years ago, my son and some of his boys are playing five-a-side in Tampa. He calls and says, Dad, we're getting ready to go to the finals, but we're a man short. Can you come and play? Now I gotta tell you that
Young buck.
but watch this now. I'm still the leading scorer at my university, all-time leading scorer, right? So when he called, before he could finish, I'm like, well, of course I could come because in my mind, Carrie Ann, I'm still
You're
amazing.
young. Yeah.
So I go out there and I play for 90 minutes. I'm hurting so bad I could hardly walk back to my car.
Pop up.
So I get home that evening, and on a scale of 1 to 10, my soreness is about a 12. So I said, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm hurting so bad, I'm going to try.
I'm gonna try it.
I rubbed our Relievit product everywhere I was hurting. Woke up the next morning, my soreness was about a 1 to 2.
Wow.
So I had my staff meeting the next day and I shared the story with my team. And one of my team members, actually my nephew, said, well, I wonder what would happen if you applied it before you played. I'm like, what, before? Who does that, right? But, I'm no longer
Hmm.
25.
Do some prep work before you go. It's like stretching.
so, so, I go back out the next week, but this time I said, all right, I'm going to apply Relieve It everywhere I had soreness the prior week. Carry on. I played another 90 minutes, walked off the pitch feeling like I'd never played.
Feeling like your young self again.
Might have even scored a goal or two.
Oh my goodness.
So next day I rushed back to the university because I want to share this with the scientists. They explained to me that while I was playing, I had microscopic tears in my muscle, right? So if you're a runner, you go to the gym, whatever it is that you do, and you pushing hard, you have microscopic tears, and those tears trigger release of inflammation. Because our ingredient is a natural anti-inflammatory, it actually inhibits the release of that inflammation, or prevents the release of that inflammation. And where there's no inflammation, there's no soreness or pain. So I said,
Mhm.
all right, we might be on to something here, but we need to test it with a group of people that have significant soreness. So we said, all right, let's engage with marathon runners, because them people,
Psh, I
that's
don't
my
know
joke.
how they mm.
So for about a year, we started putting the product in running stores, and reaching out to marathon run. And marathon runners are coming back and telling us they finish in race with their best PR, and having minimal soreness afterwards. So I said, all right, I had the experience. We real world tested it. Now let's do a clinical study. So we commissioned a study at the university with 66 endurance runners. The criteria was you had to run at least 25 miles in order to qualify. Okay. And so we had three groups: a group that used our product, a group that used a placebo, a sham product, and then a group that used nothing at all. The group that used our product and the placebo applied it 5 minutes before the run and again before going to bed. The group that used our product, their soreness never reached mild. And by the next day, the soreness was decreasing. Soreness increases.
Listen, Caleb, I need you to send me the starter pack. The high heel relief, the relieve it, and the pre-covery. I need the starter pack. All right.
so, so we said, all right, we on to something again. And so, pain is that's our overarching mission, right? But there's all kinds of competition in pain. Everybody has a product. When we discovered that the product prevents muscle soreness, we said, all right, what we're going to do is, and it was my son who came up with the name Precovery. He said, it's really Precovery is recovery reimagined. And so he said, we're going to launch Precovery, disrupt a $30 billion industry, and continue to work on transforming the ingredient into an ingestible form for the purpose of licensing that ingredient to big companies to put it in food and beverage and cosmetics and skincare and so forth. See, we can't do everything, right? So we said we're not going to try and boil the ocean. Much easier to boil a cup of tea than the
Teach.
ocean.
That let me tell you another gem. I think the session we did about partnerships, right? Figuring out who you're going to be able to license and make have partnerships with. It's so smart, Caleb. So smart.
Yes,
You're teaching us today.
right. So we're going to focus on Precovery, because the goal is in the next 5-10 years, Precovery is the biggest sports performance brand in the world. And again, we create the ingestible and just form partnerships. So in 2021, we had calls with some of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world. They're just waiting for us to finish up the ingestible. So we don't need to make pain products. Let them do what they do best. Just pay us the royalty.
Listen, man, I hear that. I hear that. I hear that. So smart.
But let me say this, because I've had the challenges that I experienced fundraising. Um, I want to basically mirror what Pharrell Williams. We happen to share the same surname, okay? Because there's so many of us that have great ideas, doing wonderful things, but as we talked about, we don't have that network that could write the check. I'm going to be that guy who writes the checks.
Whenever you're ready, call me because I tell you, I've been telling people that my experience in that program was just so transformative, especially given where I was at the start of 2022
Mhm.
with the passing of my father, to go through this program
Sorry to
and
hear that.
saying that, okay, like, I was ready to give up on everything.
Yeah,
And I was applying for grants and a bunch of other things. I wasn't getting anything. And at the last minute, I'm like, you know what? Let me just apply.
yeah.
And I got in and I had a phenomenal mentor. I had phenomenal sessions. And it was just like, this is what our community needs.
Yes,
But they have the contacts to get the right people to come and have the conversation.
that's right.
We were in that brand session together and that community session. That guy's
Yes,
phenomenal.
yes, yeah.
Phenomenal. I'm like, "Imma follow you because he just hooked me, like, reeled me in, and I know that's what our community needs, and not to be dismissed
That's right.
by or perceived size or not able to. We just need people who have the resources willing to
We
invest,
we
so
we
I'm glad.
we do, and the whole concept is, as those of us, as we reach certain levels, we then must reach back and pull up as many as we can,
Absolutely.
and we keep that process. Listen, other groups, this is what they do,
Yeah.
okay?
Absolutely.
And so my set of experiences, my mistakes, my whatever, I don't want others making the same mistakes, going through the same hardships. Sometimes it's not
100%.
even just about the funding, but it could be a connection. It could
Yep.
be, right? But when I have when Precovery is the biggest sports brand, performance brand in the world, my network will be massive and I
Yep.
will be able to connect. That for me, that so there's two things that are important for me. My grandmother, I want the history books to show her face associated with this discovery.
Come on now. Come
Okay.
on now, cause she did that thing.
Right?
She did it.
If you type in aspirin today, you see a German fella who made that discovery, and the world will forever know he made that discovery. That's number one for me. Number two, it's about legacy. And legacy means, how many people can I help?
Mhm.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah. I am so excited for you. I mean, you didn't have to sell me hard. I was like, "Say what? It does this?" And, I mean, just incredible story. How many people have stories like you do where there's a remedy, a recipe, or something for a sauce or like all these things. But what I loved about what you did was you kept pushing the product to see where else this product could go. And we're also bringing in that real life experience about this is a great product. It's phenomenal. We're not doubting that, but it's still not easy to get the product where it needs to go, to get in people's hands, to get on the shelves,
That's right.
to get in front of the right people. So I'm really glad that you're sharing that the real,
Yeah.
of that experience. So before we wrap up, why don't you tell the audience where they could find you, where they could get the product,
Yeah.
and what else? What are you most excited for in the future? I'm just want to hear.
Well, let me start with the product. So the brand is Relieve It, the current brand, and you can find it. Go to Amazon, and it's RELIEVEIT. You find our Relieve It gel, which is fantastic for chronic pain. You find our Spray and Go gel, which is amazing for um, acute injuries. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we have our feet sore no more foot spray, and I am super excited about our pre-covery launch. And so, what does the future look like? In 2023, we've actually started kind of the groundwork for the development of the ingestible, a project to develop the ingestible. Um, and the ingestible is super, super important because no one can own a plant. What we plan to do, Carrie Ann, is to remove non-essentials from the plant. And what's a non-essential? Smell is a non-essential. Taste is a non-essential. Every you know plant potentially have some toxic chemicals. I think your audience should know that not everything that's natural is safe, right? Poison ivy is natural. Okay, so don't just go putting, I have siblings that we have a plant called Wonder the World in Trinidad. They're drinking it, they're chewing it. They're like, whoa, don't do that until there's been some science, right? And you know how we are as Caribbean people. Yeah, well, mommy did
Yeah.
that. Don't do that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right? And so before we bring this ingestible to the world, we have to make sure it's non-toxic. We have to make sure that we've ticked all the boxes. But that would allow us, when we complete this project with ingestible, to control the global intellectual property over plant. So let me tell you the companies that have done that before. I mentioned Bayer, right? You
Yep.
may have heard of a sweetener called stevia.
Yes.
All right. Well, Coke and Cargill, two companies with combined revenue about 150 billion, they went through a similar process to transform the stevia plant that came out of South America to what we now know we see in the sugar packs. But they're controlling the intellectual property. That's where we expect to be in 2023, right?
Nice. Mhm.
And so, in terms of my vision, is that in the next 5 to 10 years, you will see our ingredient in products across every vertical. It's in your food. You go to have a cup of coffee, tea. You're putting it in that. It's in your lotion, your soap, your skincare, you go to get a vaccination. You're putting it on before. It's in your pre. It's in everything. And why do we want it in everything, Karen? Is because, remember I mentioned, chronic inflammation is the greatest threat to human health. If we can use our product topically and ingest it, that will help people solve chronic inflammation from the inside out.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense.
look out for pre-covery. It's coming. And the
It's
ingredient,
on its way.
it's on its way. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, Caleb, this was such a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I am extremely excited for you. What I feel is coming for pre-covery, and I mean, excited because you've already demonstrated what you can do or the products can do it along with your company through Relieve It. So I'm just excited for you, your company, your family, and like you said, your grandmother and your mother, because grandma discovered it, but mommy, she kept it alive too.
She
So
did.
we have to give mommy props,
She
you know.
she did.
And so I'm just extremely excited, and I'm grateful to be in, company or network with you, just
I
see the
just find
growth. And yeah, yeah, it's just thank you so much. And I'll make sure I put, all of the information to find you, the products and all that in the show notes. But as I love to say at the end of every episode, walk good.
yes.